Here we have observational studies and experiments, and we're going to talk about three ways of gathering or looking at data, really. And you might say, Jason, that's only two things. Well, that's because the first thing that we're going to talk about is anecdotal evidence, which is really just not helpful. It's just something to watch out for. Okay. So if a single or small number of results, they're often unusual cases, not always, but they may or may not be representative of the population. You're having a conversation with someone about, whether whether staring at the wall for 10 minutes every day cures someone's depression. And somebody says, "Oh yeah, my friend stared at a wall every day and it cured depression." Well, that's great. That's anecdotal evidence. Good for them. That doesn't mean anything. Okay. Or you're walking around and you're thinking, what kind of car should I buy? And oh, my friend bought a Ford and they got in a car accident. So don't buy a Ford, you're going to get in a car accident. Now, whether or not you think you should buy a Ford, I'm not a car person. I know Ford's a brand of car, a make of a car. Okay. It's just anecdotal evidence. So watch out for that. And I do this on accident sometimes too. So everybody makes this mistake. Like anecdotal evidence is something, but it shouldn't be the foundation for your conclusions. Okay, do research. It could be a starting point for research. Okay. But what we're really going to talk about in this video is observational studies and randomized experiments. Observational studies, they're pretty okay. Get a decent face. Randomized experiments are really okay. All right, so what are they? Observational studies is where researchers gather data without interacting with the subjects at all. Okay, so there's studies where you observe without interacting. And we have two kinds, retrospective and prospective. So prospective, a lot of times these are done over time. Okay, together over time. A lot of times these are like watching the progress of cohorts. Okay, so but whereas retrospective is the other side of the coin. Retrospective is basically just looking at data, or so you can look at old data. Retrospective, you could ask about people's history, stuff like that. A lot of times perspective studies are pretty similar. I don't know if they're identical, but pretty similar to longitudinal studies, usually. But anyway, we won't get too down in the depths with these, but just be aware that these are things. And these are to be compared with randomized experiments, which we talk a lot about randomized experiments in the next video. So this is just very introductory, and then we really get into the weeds with this in the next one. So in a controlled, that's an important word. Randomized, also an important word. We'll talk about them later. Experiment. Researchers are assigning treatments to groups of subjects. So one subject will get a treatment, one subject will get like a placebo or something like that. And we'll measure a response variable. And these are very great because these can show causation. Observational studies, these can really only show correlation. Randomized experience can show causation. And that's really nice. So let's get some practice. A group of disabled women aged 65 and older were tracked for several years, ending in 2010. Those who had a vitamin B12 deficiency were found to be twice as likely. That's correlation right there. Found to be twice as likely, correlation, to suffer severe depression as those who did not. So this was a cohort that was tracked over time. This is a prospective observational study. You can write A over here. You can write 2 over here. You can write an arrow, whichever way you like. In letter B, researchers want to investigate whether taking aspirin regularly reduces the risk of heart attack. 400 people who identify as men are divided randomly into 2 groups. One group will take aspirin, the other group will take a placebo. At the end of the study, they count the number of men in each group who have heart attacks. Okay, so we can see that this is an experiment. This is a randomized experiment because we're dividing into two groups. Some people are getting the treatment, some people are not. There we go. That's letter B. Or you can say this is 4. Part C. Researchers who examined health records, looking at records, stuff from the past, of thousands of males, found that men who died of myocardial infarction, heart attacks, tend to be shorter than those who did not. Again, correlation. That's a retrospective study. Letter C. All right, and letter D. A doctor worked with 2 patients, and those 2 patients' depression was cured with vitamin B12 injections. Good for them, but that's anecdotal evidence. All right. I should have just chose one. We got so much writing right here. All right, that's what we got here. Let's talk a little bit about these things. In part C, which was, part C was a retrospective study. Okay, we looked at the health records. Anyway, in part C, is it correct to conclude that being a short man causes you to have a higher risk of dying from a heart attack? Or could there be a lurking or confounding variable? This is a loaded question, by the way. We can't conclude this. Okay? This was an observational study, right? It only shows correlation. We cannot conclude this. We're going to say, no, it's not correct to conclude this. Could there be a lurking or confounding variable? A lurking variable is a variable, which, remember, variable is like a characteristic, right? It's a characteristic or variable that's hidden, that we're not accounting for, that might affect things. So to think about whether there might be a lurking or confounding variable here, let's look at this example, and then we're going to come back to E. We're in Unit 9, we actually do this, but if we looked at life expectancy in a country and the average number of TVs per household in that country, these are highly correlated. If your country has a high life expectancy, it tends to have more TVs. Country has a low life expectancy, it tends to have a low number of TVs. This doesn't mean that buying TVs is going to make you live longer. It's just there's a correlation. There's a lurking variable here, right? There's something that's also correlated with these two things, right? Okay. The wealth of the country, namely, right? If you have a wealthier country, people are going to have more TVs. You're going to have better health care. Better health care leads to longer life expectancy. Okay. So it could be the wealth of a country. There's a ton of them you could put here. Ton of ideas, but just as an idea, this is an example of a lurking variable. It's a variable that's in this example, but we don't see it. Okay. And that's what you have to be really careful about in observational studies. Okay. Be careful with observational studies because of this. Experiments have a control. So experiments usually don't have these. Usually a good experiment will take care of this. Usually. Okay. So yeah, what could be a lurking or confounding variable here? I actually don't know too much about biology, so I can only guess. You might have a good of a guess. I know that like bad nutrition can affect your height, and I'm sure that bad nutrition can affect risk of dying from a heart attack. I'm sure there's other ones as well. There could be a correlation between other things. I don't want to hypothesize too much because I don't know too much about medicine. But think about these, okay? Finally, for this video, which of the situations A through D, so which of these situations can we infer causation and why? We'll talk more about this in the next one. I mentioned it here that it's only randomized experiments that really let us show causation. Anecdotal evidence is really doesn't say much. It might get you interested in a topic, but it's not proof of anything. Okay? Observational studies show correlation. It's only an experiment, though, that will show causation. Okay? We're only going to say the experiment, which was letter B, I believe. Yeah, letter B. Okay. Studies only show correlation. And anecdotes show nothing. Basically, nothing of scientific value, usually. Unless there's like something where it's a counterexample where you say nobody will ever do this. But basically, anecdotes show nothing. Talk more about experiments in the next video. Take it easy. Let me know if you have any questions, and have a good day.